So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Utah's Archaeology and Historic Preservation Month. I'm Elizabeth Hora. I'm public archaeologist at the Utah State Historic Preservation Office. You'll hear me and maybe Vice Chairman Parry refer to that as the Utah SHPO. So every May, the Utah SHPO hosts a weekly brown bag lecture series featuring researchers and other important people who are working on issues related to Utah archaeology and historic preservation topics. We ask those folks to present their work to you. You could see all of our upcoming webinars and take a look at our back catalog at ushpo.utah.gov/AHP-month. So this afternoon, we have Bradley Parry, Vice Chairman of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation, on to teach us about the history of the Shoshone people. And before we dive into that, I just have a little bit of housekeeping. I want to tell you about how you can participate in today's presentation. This is a Zoom webinar, which means that your video and audio are automatically turned off. At the end of today's presentation, we will have an opportunity for some Q&A, so I want to let you know how you can participate in that. At the very bottom of your screen, there's a tray, and you're going to see something that says Q&A panel. You can use this at any time to ask questions of our presenter. He can see your questions once you send them, so can I. And we can work on which questions we're able to answer given the time remaining, and whether they could be done live, verbally, or if that's something that we would prefer to type out. We're going to do our best to leave no question unanswered. We can also communicate with you, and you guys can communicate with each other via the chat panel. So you can contact not only us up here as panelists, you can also connect with other audience members as well. This is a really good opportunity for you to chat amongst yourselves. If this brings up any remembrances, any information you have, things like that that are not strictly speaking questions, the chat is a really great way to really enliven this conversation. During the Q&A period, there's a third option. If you do want to ask questions, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen and let us know that you would like to have your question answered in your own verbal voice. I can go ahead and turn your microphone on so that you can ask your question. So with all of that out of the way, I'm going to jump right back into it. So today's presentation will explore Shoshone interaction with the land since time immemorial via migration, and then also how they interacted with fur trappers and Mormon pioneers who entered this landscape much more recently. Bradley Parry is not only in a position of leadership and authority within the Northwestern Band, he has personal experience with modern resource management, particularly managing water resources for the Shoshone people and land. This makes him uniquely qualified to teach us all today about Shoshone history. So, Vice Chairman Bradley, thank you so much for joining us today, and please feel free to begin whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see, do I need to take the screen back? So there we go.
We can see it. It's going great.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so thank you everybody for having me. Chris and Elizabeth, thanks for asking. This is really cool. It's cool that you guys do this and have so many people participate. I always like to talk about the tribe. I speak a lot on water situations and different things, but very rarely do I get to speak about our history here, and so that's what we'll do today. So you're going to get to see a lot of maps. So hopefully that you like maps as much as I do. Just to start off, Sosagoi is kind of the correct pronunciation, is the people who travel by foot. We're called Shoshone. In Shoshone, we say Sosagoi. Parts of us are also called Shoshako, which is people who travel by horse. We received the horse in the 1700s, so we'll just talk about a few of those things. So to get started, so this was from a master's thesis by Joshua Evans in 1938 at Utah State, talking about our name. A lot of times you'll see in maps in here that we're called Snake Indians. Honestly, we have no idea how that happened. And you can see, how they were discussed. We range western Wyoming, southwestern Montana. That's a little too high, but central, southern Idaho, northern Utah, Nevada, and some of Oregon. That's really in the early days that we would travel those places. We don't know the meaning. My great grandfather was Moroni Timbimbu. He told the author, so people walk by foot. But what was interesting is, oh, excuse me, playing around with that too much. What's interesting is the author favored. Well, I'm going to favor the weavers of the grass lodge. Moroni was Chief Segwich's grandson and was a fluent speaker of the language. His wife, my great grandmother Amy Timbimbu, lived to be 105. I was in my 20s when she passed away, and so I got to talk to her a lot about some of these things. And so we people who travel by foot, but you can see throughout history how other people have given us names that have come across. Our culture. So the entire Shoshone people, that would include Goshute, Weber Utes. Weber Utes are really Northwestern Shoshone, Paiutes, in the entire Shoshone. There's about 12 or 14 different bands of Shoshone, but we refer to ourselves collectively as Nui, or the people, and kind of lived in all of these areas. This is actually Chief Washakie right here from the Eastern Shoshone and one of his encampments. And you can kind of see how they lived. This is a map that we use with the Department of Interior. This is the map. This is what the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation ceded to the federal government in the Fort Bridger Treaty of 1868. So this is just the Northwestern Band, which I'm a part of. And so you can kind of see our Aboriginal territory. Aboriginal territory is important to the Northwestern Band because we were never given a reservation. And so we kind of take a look at and say, well, this is Aboriginal in our area. So you can kind of see that vast area of how we would travel. Now, this was based on, 1860s. Prior to that, these areas were huge. This is kind of being encroached upon. This is the map that set that up. Superintendent and Governor James Dottie from Utah in the treaties needed to draw boundaries, and you can see Northwestern Shoshones and Pocatello. Pocatello, contrary to popular belief, he was a Northwestern, and so you can see how they drew that map. The Bannocks, Shoshone, Washakie Band, so the Easterns, the Western Shoshones here in Nevada, and the Goshutes, who are Shoshone people who are part of that treaty. So you can see kind of how they divided all of that area for the treaty. This was presented to the Senate in 1868. So I think we're all familiar with the Ditchipagani, or the home of the bad water. This is what we traditionally would call the home of the Salt Lake Valley, basically. So home of the bad water. When the Mormon pioneers came in 1877 and began to erect houses and barns and churches and temples and different things, we changed the name to Shogani, meaning many homes. So it went from kind of, well, here's the home of the bad water, to these many homes. But today we're known as Salt Lake City and the Great Salt Lake. So this is kind of how you would say it back then. But really important. So this is what's called the Warren Angus or the Ferris map from 1836. He was an American fur trader. I think this is in the archives at BYU. We took a look at this map. There's not a lot of mention of any tribes, but he does point out the buffalo areas through here. I know it's hard to see. What was interesting is, for the life of us, we couldn't figure out how this map worked. We thought he had it transposed, but when we got our eyeglasses out and different things, we saw that this is the Great Salt Lake. It's just flooded out in the West Desert, in that western part of the Salt Lake area there. And interesting, now with everything going on with the Great Salt Lake, that is what it looked like in 1836, just really far out there, really far north. The scale is a little off. We can't figure out exactly what this is, but possibly we thought Bear Lake. But you can kind of see all of the routes and different things that they drew in 1836. So the fur traders were really good map makers, but you can kind of see this is the Aboriginal territories and Salt Lakes, of our state. In 1837, Bonneville, this is the Bonneville map, and you can see that he really did a good job of showing what's there. So you can see Lake Bonneville, which is the Great Salt Lake, Utah Lake, kind of don't, probably something there. Utah Indians, so the mountain range would have been here, so the Utes, basically, the Ute Mountains here. And you can see Shoshone Indians, or those that had a horse, and these are all throughout here. Shoshone Indians, traditionally our area, camped along the Bear River. And notice how close everything is to water, where all the campments are. Bannock, Snake River, Bear River, the Jordan River, I think that's what they called that. I can't remember what they called that. I can't see, but the other Shoshone Indians, Flatheads. But you can see, and here's the Western Shoshone. Everything is towards water. I mean, that's really how our routes went. If you want to find a route, you can just see, this is how we would follow that down, and then come around and come to these other lakes, and things like that. And then when we travel past here, you'd run into these waters here. And so, really interesting map that we take a look at and see, a great number of Indians. So in 1837, probably 36 when he walked through, he just saw a lot of different indigenous people. Just to kind of give you some, when we talk about, kind of our dealings with fur trappers and pioneers and miners and whoever, this is one of the wagon roads from the late 1850s. Here's the Bear River Mountains, and you can just kind of see everything that just comes through Soda Springs and Cache Valley. Box Elder is here, Ogden, the Weber River, and you can just see how these trails come straight through our home. Just literally walking through the front door and the living room, and so obviously there was going to be some issues. And in the late 1850s, there were a lot of different, I'd say, dust ups between indigenous people and pioneers and those that were doing, and you could kind of see, the territory. Just again, kind of the wagon roads that you can kind of see through the area that just, came right through and started to come really quickly. Oh, thanks, Jay. I was wondering if that was Bear Lake. Just on that map from 1836, Jay Buckley from BYU would know everything, and so called that the Bear Lake. So I'll go back. Just wanted to take a look at that. As we go forward, Julian Stewart was a professor at the University of Utah. He was famous for doing routes, and so here's the prehistoric routes. I know it's kind of hard to see, the Great Salt Lake, but you can see just kind of how wide all of that was, and all the different trade routes that people would have, coming down through Echo and a lot of different places, from eastern Wyoming, the Wyoming Shoshone, Cache Valley Shoshones. But you can just see the amount of routes that people would have. There was a lot of place to get places, and we'll see some more in depth on the map. So this Murphy and Murphy map of 1960s, the Shoshone and the subsistence areas. Logan, you can see was a winter camp. There was a winter camp here that was, along the Bear River, over here. What they didn't show is there would have been a winter camp here in Corinne and kind of over here, but you can see this is the Camas Prairie, Camas route, and just how we would gather. This area would have been a rabbit hunting area, and we'll kind of look at those things, but just kind of notice all of the different maps, the prehistoric. We have oral history in the tribe that my grandmother used to tell me about. When we got the horse, I mean, the travel routes would extend over to California, down into the Gulf of Mexico, over to kind of Chaco Canyon there in New Mexico, because Chaco had exact due north and due south trails, and east and west. And so if you made it there, you could kind of find your way around. But just kind of prehistorically, you can see where the buffalo were, deer, and the fishing areas. A little fuzzy, but we'll see. So just kind of to zoom in on that. So this would, I wrote in some of these things to kind of see. And so you can see the seasons that we would go. If we were here, this would be the Northwestern Band here in this area. You can see a camp at Corinne, a lot of fishing in these rivers here, the Cache Valley, the Bear River, all the little camps that we would have had there. And just when we would travel, you'd go to Wyoming for bison. We would travel all the way out to the west, western Box Elder County, what it is, and Grouse Creek area for pine nuts. We still do that. We still try to get out there. It's a haul, but I remember my grandmother taking me out there when I was really young. Yost right through here. I spent a lot of my youth deer hunting in Yost, in these areas. We would run into people and they would see me and not realize I was a Northwestern, because look at me. And they would just say, oh, we don't go over to some of these hills because that's where the Indians have always hunted. And I said, oh, I know. And they'd look at me and I said, well, I'm one of them. So, you'll see you'll see my Browner family members later, but always, traditionally always went there. And then you'd come up for salmon run on the Snake River. Everybody went to salmon run. Jackrabbits. We would also rabbit hunt in these areas, and just all the different camps around. You can see around the Great Salt Lake and coming down through here, and just all the little areas. And so you can kind of get a good idea of how we roamed really prior to contact, really. Things started to get a little smaller afterwards, but definitely did some of those things. Kind of villages, kind of we talked about, Ogden, Cache Valley, and these are all Northwestern Band villages here, all through here. And then you can kind of see winter camps, again, the pine nuts, and just how water is important. You can kind of see in northern Utah, really, single family dwellings, winter dwellings, and some of those things. So you can just kind of get an idea of the southern Idaho, northern Utah exchange. Again, you can kind of see that the entire Great Salt Lake Basin, and how far, it has Weber Ute listed. Like I said, Weber Ute was Chief Little Soldier, who was a Northwestern, and you can see, just kind of see through there. The Goshute Valleys, all their areas, the Tooele Valley Goshutes, Mixed Ute and Goshute, and then all of the, the Northwestern bands and the Shoshone bands up through here. And Corinne was a place that we lived, along the river, fishing and different things. So just kind of the villages that you kind of get an idea, the travel route. If we camped here in the winter, you can see our travel route down through here, along along the rivers, and then, along the creeks, and then around to go through here. Um, in this area, you can get to California, you can go this way, go through Echo, and get up into eastern Nevada. So this was a good crossroads for a lot of different tribes to meet, and that's really what happened. This is out in eastern Nevada, western Utah, just to make sure that, in the October, November timeframe, that's when we would be here for pine nuts. We always had to be somewhere at a certain particular time because that's when things happened. And so that was our pine nutting area. Very busy map. Dr. Stewart didn't make things easy for me, but he did make good maps if you have those, and just how they label things. Hookah eaters, the fish eaters. The hookah means seeds. Hookandika is seed eaters, and that's what we were called. Incidentally enough, Chief Segwich, who was our chief after at the time of the Bear River Massacre and afterwards, hosted the rabbit hunts in this area, and pine nut eaters, which is interesting because they have all these different things, but we were all kind of doing it together. The tribes were, and so we all took part in all of these things. Salmon eaters or Bengwi-Dika. You can just kind of see that, but it's just really interesting to kind of see our old roots there. Something else that was important to us was obsidian. That was a thing, that was a material we traded. It was a material that we used. I mean, arrowheads, axes, tools, sharpened instruments. I mean, we use a lot of obsidian when we come across it in our territory. We're pretty sure that, it's something that our ancestors would have used. And with today's technology, we've handed several obsidian points over to the University of Utah, and if they have enough data, they can tell us which mine it came from. And so you can just kind of see all the different obsidian mines in that area. There's also obsidian up there in Idaho. One of the areas, obviously the spiral jetty wasn't there when we camped there, but we would camp on the banks. My grandmother would tell me that her grandfather Jaeger told her that they would camp right on the banks here. And his father, Chief Segwich, or whoever the chief was of the Northwestern Band, they organized hunts. That's really what a chief did. Is you were an organizer. You were somebody that got a plan. Everything was decided in family councils, both men and women. But at the end of the day, they would elect someone to be the leader. And really, honestly, your job was to kind of organize and herd sheep with people to do that. But always a big history out here. At Promontory Point and Golden Spike, all of those different things. I spelled organize wrong. Just a little bit about us. A lot of people called us diggers because we were root diggers or seed eaters. Hukandika, Gumodika is like I said, rabbit eaters. Those are two of our main food sources, but really seeds. Because we traveled all season long picking different seeds and different berries from everywhere. And you can see, as these are all fur trappers that had come through and just talked about, and Howard Stansberry, who was an expeditioner, just took notice of what we did. Thought we were poor doing it, but that was really a really good protein diet when you found those seeds. Obviously the bison used for almost anything. You can kind of see, we traditionally hunted those until they kind of ran out, 1840s, 1850s, in areas that we traveled. Chief Segwich had told a story to a writer at the end of his life in Cache Valley, and talked about a harsh winter in the 1820s where after the winter, they came up and counted only 7 of these little type of buffalo in the Cache Valley area, and so that was kind of the last time they saw them there. But prior to that, they had buffalo jumps, they had different things that are still there that you can find, and would constantly hunt those sorts of things. And sometimes when I talk to people about hunting buffalo in Utah, it's hard to believe, but oral history and other histories has kind of told us that. But that was a really big staple. Mule deer, another big staple that's, like I mentioned, out in Yost. Um, you kind of find these and still do those things today. Plants that and so everywhere we traveled, along those rivers that we were looking at, we would always make sure that our staples were there, like a cattail. Really used it for a lot of things. Still, we still are trying to bring some of those back on the sites that we have and the land that we own, because you can do so much with it. We sometimes, for our activities, we will actually go and pick and make children's dolls together, but cattail was very important to us. But I think the most important plant to us was the willow, often referred to in the tribe as the woman's plant because it gives life. Willows were used for everything from cradle boards to wickiups, food, medicine, bedding. I mean, really, you could make containers and baskets and different things like that. So we always traveled to those places of willow. And back in the early days, if you read Peter Skeen Ogden's some of his journal, he talks about going through the Cache Valley, or going through this area there in northern Utah, southern Idaho, and seeing nothing but 10, 15-foot willows, and was so glad when he got out of there to finally see something else. But really used for a lot of things, very important to the Northwestern Band. And so we always traveled around willows and the plants that we could use. If you're traveling by foot, you don't drag plains teepees, the big canvas and buffalo hide teepees. I mean, you used what was there in the area, because you were constantly on the move. Chief Saywich, who is my great 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 grandfather, in speaking in about 12 to 13 years before his life, just said he's always known white people. He's always known white men. He's always known the white race. He's always mostly had peace with them day to day. And so his life, that started, he knew that's what he knew. Prior to him, probably a little bit different, but he was one of those chiefs that realized that, okay, we have to start coming together. Chief Saywich, a couple days after Brigham Young entered into the valley in July of 1847, he went and met with him with his cousin John Momberg, or his Indian name was Ijipa, which means coyote. And they talked to the Mormon leaders there and said, we understand, we've been following you, because they had runners from eastern Wyoming all the way here talking about these weird people that don't shoot Indians, really only shoot game for food, and dance at night and sing, and kind of a lot like what our culture was a little bit like. And so they offered to Brigham Young that he could stay, his people and him, and they could stay. I don't think they understood at the time how large this church gathering was going to be, but our people in oral history and even some of the church written history, we bandaged the feet of the pioneers that had been walking. We showed them the difference between the seagull lily and what looks like a seagull lily but will kill you. Up around there, how to extract salt and the best areas to do that, and just really kind of what you could eat and do. So we had a lot of really good interaction with them at first, because it was, kind of a smaller people, and camped along the Great Salt Lake. But that started to change almost immediately as the Mormons entered the valley. Just more and more and more came. This is Chief Little Soldier, also was the leader of what's called the Weber Utes, Northwestern. He actually lived at Washakie with us and knew all of the same church leaders and different things, and was always said to have a really good relationship. I've attended a few things in Ogden recently where they've changed, they have Chief Little Soldier Way, and really try to honor him as being someone who was friendly. We talked about that, the Snake Indians. sometimes they get some really interesting, they glide away in the rocks. Had a lot of dealings with Peter Skeen Ogden, talking with us in some of his journals where he describes where he camped in certain winters. We knew that they were with our people back then, in the early 1800s. Root diggers, just like we talked about, and then a root like a yam. These are some of the things we would do, and so we would always travel to these areas where they were, and that's where expansion really started to, expansion of the railroad, of the pioneers, the Mormon settlers, the miners. These sorts of areas started to get trampled under with cattle, and our roots were taken off. Water began to be diverted, and so our way of life really took a change, really took a turn really quick. This is a group in the late 1800s camped in Logan, our tribe there. Just, I think they said this was on the grounds of where the Logan Temple is. I mean, we're just running out of places to camp, but actually a lot of these people here helped build the Logan Temple, because they needed a job or something to do. And always with the rendezvous, you can see all the different areas. Chief Segwitch had passed down that he had attended 4 rendezvous in his lifetime and traded for traps and materials and different things. And this is traditionally really when you're out, traveling, is what your dwelling would look like. It was kind of a place where you just kind of sleep, be cozy, because there was work to do when you got up the next day and traveled. So you use sticks and willows and cottonwoods to make your house. And then you can see a more permanent dwelling, the cradle board, and the different things just out camping. So I just kind of hope you could see kind of like how we used the Great Salt Lake Valley. We interacted, a lot with fur trappers. The Mormons come in, and what leads to what the tribe is most famous for is the Bear River Massacre. A lot of people ask me, well, why did this happen? Well, we saw the different wagon routes and the different things, and we know that the Mormon pioneers came in and started to expand in 1860s. In the 1860s, they began to expand northward, and we really were starving at that time, because all of the natural waterways, the fields, the game were just gone, and we hadn't signed a treaty yet. There was no reservation, and so we were constantly running into miners or Mormon settlements or just whoever, and skirmishes would arise, and a lot of times they would be written against us. Some of the stuff we deny, like, hey, that never happened. Some of the things that did, we accounted for it. Precipitation to the Bear River Massacre, one of the last straws, a couple of the last straws, is we had 3 members from the Northwestern Band that stole some cattle and some horses from a local community, and that got reported. And then some miners who were coming back from Montana claimed they got jumped by 3 chiefs and 200 warrior braves, and they had a party of 7, and they lost 3 or 4 of those people. And I'm like, well, I don't think you ran into 200, or none of you would have made it. His testimony led to Colonel Connor making the decision to come up, and you can see this is Bear River there, just northwest of Preston, Idaho, Franklin County there. This is a map that was drawn just a few days after, and you can kind of see the encampments through here, and just kind of the ultimate decimation of our people at that time. Really because, we were getting food from Mormon food storages. We were begging for food. We tried to hunt and gather, but it just really came down to two different cultures not understanding each other. You know, we needed to eat, and we were going to do almost whatever possible, because we lost almost every food source from those sorts of things. So in 2018, we purchased that site back. We call it the Wutaogwa, or the Bear River Massacre Site. Wutaogwa is just a literal translation of Bear River. And since we obtained that, one of the things that we want to do and remind people of is we had this natural culture. And so here's the area of the Wutaogwa site. This is where the camp would have been. Chief Segwich was camped here. His son, who survived, took a picture there in the early 1900s, and we found it and were able to match the background with it. And so we know a lot of these areas, you know, you can see the Bear River. This is all flat ground now, and Russian olives everywhere. And so when we purchased it, we said, well, what do we do? You know, our ancestors wouldn't have understood this. You know, we could do something different. And so they had channelized the ditch system here. And so the water is extremely dirty. There used to be tons and tons of Bonneville cutthroat trout in these areas, but they've been gone because of the water quality. While we were surveying out there, we found this, what they call Elko chert projectile. The University of Utah's had it for 2 years and are studying it, and their initial studies at this time are saying that it was 3,000 years old. And so, you know, we camped at that site for at least 3,000 years or walked through there. And so, you know, really important find. We didn't think we'd find anything because of how much work and silt had gone onto there, but you can see still remnants of our people that are there. So this is our plan, really, you know, to take the Battle Creek, what used to be called Beaver Creek, because of all the fur trapping in the area, and it was really a cache for beaver. And the, you know, fur trappers would stay with us along these areas. At the time of the massacre in 1863, these creeks had just meanders that all throughout. And so you can see, you know, camping areas through here. And this is what we want to turn it back to. And, you know, just to show naturally, if you have something natural, you can rebuild, and we can teach our culture. What some of the byproduct is about 13,000 acre feet of water per year to the Great Salt Lake. You know, cleaner water going downstream. You know, just by trying to just be more climate and environmentally conscientious, and you can see. But we're doing a lot of studies to make sure we don't destroy our area. Just kind of, you know, an early encampment that we had, and this is in Box Elder County. Just kind of see when we started to settle down, we had more permanent types of homes. And so, and on our site there, you know, this is we've taken out all these Russian olives, but this is what we want it to look like. This is something our ancestors would have remembered, and it's something our people from time immemorial would have remembered, seeing these things and walking through here, and just kind of, you know, trying to restore some of that on 350 acres, so we can all kind of feel of the spiritual presence of people that walk there. So I hope that was understandable. So you know, thank you for listening. Appreciate that. But I had told Elizabeth and Chris that I would absolutely leave some time for questions. So that went a little quick, but we'll go.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions in the chat, and I want to remind people that you can put questions, you know, in the question and answer. That way we'll be sure to see them in case people start firing off in the chat. Bradley, it looks like maybe your camera has stopped working.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, well, these things happen. There you are. Welcome back. So, Henry DeJong asks, what would a typical travel day, distance, style, etc., be on foot? And then maybe how would that compare to horse?
Yeah, so it would, you know, typically, you know, be a few miles a day, depending on how long you needed get someplace. So after the winter, say we were in really southern Idaho and we wanted to start moving down, for wild strawberries and fishing up in the Ogden and Weber Canyons and Cache Valley Canyons. It would take a couple of days to get to a certain spot. Then you'd set up there and you'd catch as many fish or whatever as possible. That's another reason why the Great Salt Lake was really important to us, is because we always were there gathering salt, and that was one of our trips that we had to make in the spring, was so we could cure our food. And so it would take typically a couple of days to get to a location, and you would stay there for as long as you needed to, and then you would take off to another site again. A lot of times the timing was determined by the time of season. You needed to get to a certain place at a certain time, based on the moon, based on, the sun and the weather. And when you started seeing different leaves turn green or turn fallish colors, you knew you had to be to a place. So you either quickened your haste or you had time to settle back. But usually you'd set up in a place for a month, gathering and getting things done. And then you'd walk for a few days and you'd settle down. And then depending on where you needed to be, independent hunters and, younger soldiers and stuff like that would often ride off. Sometimes people would go visit families in those areas because they knew they could get there and get back, because you'd probably be there for a month or two.
Thanks. Very detailed. Thank you. Henry DeJong also had asked if you knew of any accounts from Shoshone people of meeting Jed Smith on his trek from California.
Yeah, I saw that. I
Yeah.
haven't heard any. I can certainly. That was an interesting question. I kind of want to deep dive into that. That'll be my next thing. I haven't personally. I don't know, but that we could have. So I haven't heard anything yet, though.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like when I hear these kinds of stories, people had their feelers out for everything, right? Everybody was in constant communication with each other, even though today it seems like the distances are pretty extreme for, communication by mouth.
Yeah.
But I mean, people really were traveling a lot, and they were highly aware of everything going on around them.
Yeah.
Kyler Wakefield says, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Many people are saying that. And also he asks, doesn't the Northwestern Band of Shoshone have any plans to speak about or interpret the Bear River Massacre with the redevelopment of the area?
Yes, we're that's one of the reasons we're redeveloping the area, so we can do that. To tell as many people, to tell the story. One of our goals is we've done so much work with maps and with journals and archaeologists out there to try and decide, make sure we knew where we camped, make sure where the waterways were, so we can depict the story of our people were camping here and here and here, and the water was here, which will help us tell that story. There's also plans. We are fundraising for a cultural interpretive center that would be built about 2 miles away from the site up on a hill, but you can still kind of overlook, well, about a mile. You can still overlook the entire valley, and that would be a place where we would reinterpret the site for people. And one of our goals is to build walking trails through there so people can come and have about a 4 mile walk, back and forth, and learn not only about our history there, but that was a shoreline for Lake Bonneville. Red Rock Pass is just northeast of us there, really close. We'd have oral histories about Lake Bonneville bursting, and so just kind of tell all the geological things there as well.
Excellent. We have another question. This person is wondering how various tribes recognized each other. So prior to European contact, what did various tribes have in common? Something like maybe a language.
Yeah, so the Numic people, what's called Numic, or the Nui people, Goshu, Hopi, Comanche, Shoshone, all the different bands of Shoshone, Bannock, even a little bit, all had a similar language or Numic speaking pattern. You had different slang or different terms inside each different band, like, tribal members, like today, when we were trying to decide what we should name the Bear River Massacre Site in Shoshone, at first a lot of people called it Boa Ogoy, but that, our tribal elder said that's a feeling. That's not an actual term. So we said, well, what about Bia Ogoy, which meant big river? But all of our tribal members in Idaho said, well, no, that means mother. And I mean, we sat there and debated Bia for about 2 hours. So there's a lot of those differences, but you really kind of could tell, through language, and you'd interacted so long that you kind of knew, you know, grandma would talk to me about, we could tell by the looks of the Crow or the Cheyenne, and really what they used, the horses, Chief Washkey was known for Appaloosas. And so you could really kind of tell, kind of what was going on. Not a lot of interaction with people outside of your language. In the later days, earlier days, probably a lot more.
Thank you. So I recall you have a graduation of a niece to attend. Do we need to wrap this up?
I can have a couple more questions. Yeah, I
Okay.
got a preschool great niece, and then a niece graduating from high school. So I got 2 things today. That's great. I'm excited.
And of equal importance.
Yeah.
Of equal achievement and merit. Wonderful. So a couple more questions. Henry DeJong again asks if you know about the genetic lineage of the Shoshone people, particularly any origins. That is a toughie.
That is a tough question. That's quite debated. Professor Sims from Utah State has kind of written some things on it. The tribe has always felt, and we still feel this today, that we are remnants from Fremont, but that's not the scientific case. And so that's one of those things that if we found someone that, a grad student or a professor that really needed something to do, that would be amazing to kind of see, Euro-Aztecan. I mean, the whole Aztecan culture is really kind of what people have pinned on us. But as our oral history goes back so far that we're like, well, Fremont maybe, but that's a really great question. We really don't have the exact answer.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I mean, you even mentioned Uto-Aztecan, that's a language group. So going back to your earlier response, similar language families may or may not indicate similar genetic connections, right? That's pretty complex. Okay, we've got, Chris Merritt would like to say something.
Absolutely.
The Utah State Historic Preservation Officer. So Chris?
It's going to be a hard one. No, I just wanted to thank you, Vice Chairman, for your time today. And I wanted to recognize Rios Pacheco, who's in the virtual audience today, another great leader in the Northwest Band of Shoshone. And I just wanted to ask something that we typically get sometimes focused on past. And I'm a government bureaucratic nerd. And I just thought, as your role as Vice Chairman, could you maybe speak to just a couple minutes of the priorities of the tribal government right now for your own people?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking that, Chris. Right now, one of the biggest things that we're involved in is protecting our treaty of 1868. We actually are in federal court with the state of Idaho, who claims that we have not always been a recognized tribe. From 1868 until now, that we had lapses and that we were just kind of a throw together. So everything that I talked to you guys about today, we get to present to a federal judge, and really protecting sovereignty will always, and that's really what it is always going to be at the forefront of the tribe's opportunities. It may seem small, but like, well, hunting, it's like, well, it's really sovereignty, and so we're engaged in that. But beyond stuff like that, where all tribes have to fight for that. Currently, for the Northwestern Band, it's really a cultural awareness or a cultural history of in being engaging with the different state leaders, communities. Typically, that hadn't happened before. I mean, states and tribes. You hear horror stories, but I just want to speak to the state of Utah and, to Chris and his office, and to, Lieutenant Governor, who's supported by the governor. She's actually over Indian Affairs, and just the support we get that we're able to work with. You know, we're asked opinions about what would you think about the area in the Great Salt Lake, and we're able to talk to people about here's what we're doing in a conservation way. You know, because we believe in, you know, we believe in protecting the land and kind of keeping it natural, and that's really one of the biggest things we're out there talking about right now. Is, you know, governmentally, the tribe's biggest programs are education, healthcare, and housing. And so always making sure our people are taken care of. And lastly, on our list is, you know, like I had mentioned before, we've never been given a reservation. And so to make we're making requests from the Department of Interior to find federal land that's, you know, in our Aboriginal territory, maybe a little bit out of the way, you know, so people aren't like, you know, oh, you guys are going to build a casino. No, we just need a place that we can stamp and call home, you know, 10, 20,000 acres. And if you think about the Wind River Reservation, which is 1,000,000 acres plus, you know, 20,000 acres in the West Desert is going to be a little bit different, you know, and those are some of the things. And I know Jessica Maltcam's on here from BLM, and we're talking with them about certain things because that's a lot of that land out there is theirs. And so those are really some of the things that we're trying to do. But you know, the cultural awareness and working together, you know, I don't know how many people know, you know, Chris is involved, has taken us out to different trail sites and is really trying to keep that going. And working together is really what our focus is. And so, you know, he mentioned our spiritual leader, Rios Pacheco. I'm glad he's on. He can correct me when I get back to the office if I said anything bad. But you know, he and I try to make time, and by that I mean we've been asked so much that before it was easy to do, but now, you know, we take it's a lot of responsibility that we take seriously to work together so everybody understands each other's culture and everybody can understand environmental importance.
Thank you. And Chris, thank you for the question. And Vice Chairman Parry, thank you for the answer about how this ties into living members of the tribe, because the only reason why anyone is interested in the past is because we're the living people who live with it today, right? It's important to living people today. So thank you so much.
No, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure. So thank you for hosting me. If you have any other questions, you can, I mean, Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I can get them to you. You have my email. If
Sure.
something burning that someone needs to know, I'll see if I can track down the answer.
Thank you. That's very generous. And you've been very generous with your time too. We really appreciate you today giving us this whirlwind tour of thousands and thousands of years of Shoshone history. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
You too. And for anyone who's interested, we still have one more webinar next Wednesday, same time, same place. It is about the Olmsted Power Plant right in the mouth of the Provo Canyon. So we hope to see you then.